Hello, everyone, and welcome to another MTE preview. This time we have got the Fort Myers tip off, another four-team MTE that gets underway this weekend. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and joined with me is Joe Meade. And Joe, the reason why you're joined with me is your Michigan Wolverines are in this tournament. Should be a good one down there in Florida. It gets started. The Beach Division gets started on Monday, 6 o'clock on Fox Sports 1. Game 1 will be the 3-1 Wolverines against the 3-1 Virginia Tech Hokies from the ACC. Michigan lost to Wake Forest in a close game, beat TCU pretty handily, and Virginia Tech has won 3 bye games. They'll have probably won a fourth by the time this tournament starts. And in their one game against power competition, the Penn State Nittany Lions, they got thrashed. So, Joe, you have to like Michigan's chances going into this one.
I really do. I think one of the weaknesses Michigan's had all year, and it's really the only glaring one through 4 games, is the turnovers. 21 against TCU, probably 50 million against Wake Forest because there were a bunch of those that should have been turnovers, and then 18 against Miami of Ohio. That's not going to get it done. Away from the negatives, I do think this matchup could be a lot like the Penn State one for Virginia Tech. So I do think they'll be competitive through most of this game because I do think they'll have learned a great deal from closing out and leaving guys wide open, which is something against Michigan you can't do, whether it's Sam Walters, Trey Donaldson, Damari Burnett. All 3 of those guys have showcased throughout their careers to be phenomenal shooters no matter where they've been. With that said, though, Sean, I do think Virginia Tech also turns the ball over a lot. I think they average about 14, 15 a game, not including the one they're playing against Jacksonville as we record this. So give me Michigan to win a competitive, probably like 6 to 10 point basketball game. I do think it'll go a lot like the TCU one where, they keep the other team at an arm's length but can't quite blow them out of the gym. So give me Michigan to advance to the final.
And these neutral court games, Joe, often don't really have the best crowds. I mean, there are a couple fan bases here that do travel well, and you'd expect a small Michigan contingent there, but I think the only way Michigan doesn't win this is if they have a really bad shooting night. I think you just make a couple of shots and you're going to win this game by double digits. We think that Michigan's a better team than Penn State, and Penn State had no problem with the Hokies. So I do think that Michigan will win by 20 in this one. Even though they're turning the ball over, the offense still looks okay at times, especially when you get Cheddar or Walters at the 4, which we've talked about a bunch of times. But I do think that this one shouldn't be close, and if it is, then maybe there's a couple other things that we need to talk about down the road. All right, Game 2 here, Joe. Also on Fox Sports 1 around 8:30 p.m. It's the Xavier Musketeers coming out of the Big East against South Carolina coming out of the SEC. Xavier is 4-0 with 3 bye-game victories and then a victory against Wake Forest at home on Saturday. They are beating Siena right now at the time of recording by a margin that seems like they'll get the job done there. So they're going to head down to Florida, Joe, with 5 wins. And I have to think they're a little bit on the underrated side coming in. A tough year last year where they lost 2 starters right before the season and never really found their feet after that. They've got a couple of those guards back. And then on South Carolina's side, you lose a tough one to North Florida to open up. You pick up 2 bye wins, and then you never really compete at Assembly Hall. So, Joe, I have to think this one is a little bit lopsided like the first one. You'd have to be surprised if anything other than a convincing Xavier win here.
I think outside of a Jacoby Wright or Colin Murray Boyles going off for the Gamecocks, that Xavier is going to dominate this game. I do think Xavier. I'm pretty shocked that they're not a top 25 team by now. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean they're there in other metrics wise, but yeah, they should be. They've been awesome so far. They
yeah.
dominated Wake Forest.
Xavier thus far has been one of the pleasant surprises of the Big East, unlike
The only one.
Villanova. Yeah, well, that's St. John's, but we can talk about that later.
That's a
But
different. That's a different video. Yeah.
outside of that, though, Sean, I think Xavier will win this game probably by 10 to 15 points.
Yeah, and Ryan Conwell, the Indiana State transfer, leading the way for them with 18. Zach Fremantle is 5th or 6th year of college hoops. He's had some injury trouble. He's up there scoring a lot, and then Davion McKnight also. They've got 3 really good players. The depth might be a little bit of a concern later down the line, but I do think they're a significantly better team than South Carolina, and I do think there's a chance that both these semifinals will be upwards of 20 points. So, Joe, we both agree Michigan Xavier in the championship?
Yep,
All
absolutely.
right. So we got a Big East team against a Big Ten team, both coming off of years where they didn't make the tournament, both looking solid so far. You have to say you think they should make the tournament this year. What do you see in your potential matchup here?
Yeah, Sean, real quick, just a fun fact. Michigan's the second odds-on favorite to win the Big Ten regular season per FanDuel, minus 220 to make the tourney. So I find that pretty fascinating. Outside of
We're
that,
going to do a post in the. It'll probably be up by the time that this video releases, but we are going to do a make the tournament odds post because a ton of them are out, especially on FanDuel. But yeah, go ahead.
absolutely. Outside of that, though, Sean, I do think Xavier wins this game. I think they're a little more disciplined. They play well. They play better together than Michigan does up to this point. I do think if this game was in January or February, I would be singing a different tune. But ultimately, turning the ball over against a team like Xavier, who pretty much shut down Wake Forest, the team that Michigan lost to, is not a great side for Michigan winning this game. I do think Michigan's going to be very competitive because they can make shots, because they have so many guys who can beat you, that they're eventually going to find the right combination. Ultimately, though, I do think they dig themselves too deep a hole, and their comeback effort is all for naught. And I think Xavier wins a game that's probably within two possessions most of the second half, but Michigan would have probably dug itself too deep of a hole. So give me Xavier to win the Fort Myers Classic in a probably, I'll say, like a 78-72 kind of game over Michigan.
I'm going to go the other way, Joe. I'm going to go with your Wolverines. Dusty's back in Florida. A lot of good vibes for him down there. And I do think the depth of Michigan will cause too many issues for Xavier, especially it being the second in a short amount of time, little prep. Danny Wolf might be the most unique player in the country. Not many teams are running 4 or 5 wing side ball screens, and I think that might cause Xavier a couple of issues. And I do think Michigan will win this game where they'll be ahead by a significant margin. Maybe Xavier pulls it back, but they end up using all of their energy there, and Michigan wins a close one, 78-72. But, Joe, this should be a sneaky good one. Now, there's a ton of good MTEs, but 2 really good teams, I think, in this bracket, and we'll see what happens. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this MTE preview. Hopefully there'll be a ton more, and we'll see you next time.